Daniel Grimes, good to see you again from Washington, D.C. How have you been?
Doing well. How's it out there in Chicago, Terry?
Actually in Springfield, but it is a busy time as the state legislature starts to wrap up its business and will be out of session, we think this year on time at the end of May, but there in Washington, D.C., we want to be able to follow up on some of the events up there. And I know that we assigned you recently to conduct an interview with one of our Illinois Congressional delegation members, Representative Jan Schakowsky. And we're going to run the whole interview, the viewers should know. It runs about 8 minutes or so, where she talks about some of the different things. But tell us a little bit about your interview and what were some of the things that you got into?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to chat with the Representative Schakowsky, who represents the Evanston District in Chicago. And we discussed a myriad of different things from her committee this week. She had mentioned about a $5 billion fine that Facebook is facing because of their users' privacy agreements. And so Facebook right now is facing that $5 billion fine from the FTC, and she called that fine not enough. And so I got a chance to chat with her to figure out, well, what does she think is enough? Because Facebook, as we have saw in the past, had this sort of not really using the privacy of its users, not really taking that into consideration. And so they're facing this fine as punishment for that. And she says that's not enough. So you'll get a chance once you see the interview to figure out what she thinks. We also chatted about this asbestos bill. So what she found is that there's asbestos in children's makeup products. And we all know that that's pretty troubling. And so she told me a little bit of how she's going to fix that problem. And then lastly, we chatted about whether or not she thinks Facebook, Google, and other tech companies are too big and should be broken up. And so we saw last week Chris Hughes, the co-founder of Facebook, he called for breaking up the company. He said that it's become too big and that the acquisition of WhatsApp and Instagram needs to be considered. And she told me her thoughts on that legislation.
We appreciate you taking the time to get that interview with the Congresswoman. And so we're going to play that interview now, and of course people can watch it both on the Illinois channel and we put it on around the state, but they can always go to our website on YouTube, and that's youtube.com/Illinois Channel TV, where they can see all of the content that we bring. And working with people like yourself, you've done a great job for the Illinois Channel, bringing us these interviews out of Washington, D.C. Let's take a listen to the interview you did with Jan Schakowsky. And Daniel Grimes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
Representative Schakowsky, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
It's always my pleasure.
So I just want to start off with the Federal Trade Commission is proposing legislation, a big fine to punish Facebook for alleged violation of the user's privacy, and that fine could be as much as $5 billion. But you said that fine this week was not enough. What do you think is enough?
Well, it's not just a matter of the dollar figure, which I think Facebook can afford more than that. The issue is, I think we need to give more authorities to the Federal Trade Commission, not just fining. We need to set some bright lines, some rules of the road before these companies go off the rails. And so we want to give them rulemaking authority. We want to give them more resources. It's really a tiny agency in the millions rather than even $1 billion. They have only 40 people overseeing all of tech right now. Imagine in Europe they have 500, and so we need to do more. These fines, some it's worth the cost of business just to pay the fines.
Do you think that, so Facebook co-founder Chris Hughes said in an op-ed this week that the company should break up and, should the acquisitions of WhatsApp and Instagram need to be taken care of and let go? Would you support legislation that broke up Facebook?
I definitely want to talk to him. In fact, I'd like to invite him to our committee. This is a man who worked for many years for Facebook. He calls Zuckerberg his buddy, his friend. So this isn't personal, but this is about a monopoly. And increasingly, all over the world, we're talking billions of people, imagine, in this world, who one way or another are connected to the Facebook empire. And so I think this really does need to be considered. What are the downsides for consumers? Mark Zuckerberg has been apologizing for activities of Facebook for decades, since he was in his dorm room in college, and that's not enough. So I think we need some rules of the road that may include actually breaking up Facebook. I want to talk to him about it.
Oh, well, that's some news right there. Switching gears just a little bit, Representative, you proposed some legislation this week to make, cosmetics marketed towards children a little bit safer. Can you tell us about that legislation?
Well, I'm supporting legislation that would get asbestos out. Can you imagine? I also have a Safe Cosmetics Act. Average 10 personal care products a day per person in the United States of America. And there are literally thousands and thousands of chemicals that we know can be carcinogens, that means cancer causing, that can be toxic to people and to people in salons that use those products every day as a matter of their work. And we need to enforce some standards for cosmetics. We call it the Food and Drug and Cosmetics Act. We regulate food, we regulate to some extent drugs, not prices, but cosmetics, barely at all. And there are tens of thousands of chemicals, most of which have not been tested at all. And so my Safe Cosmetics Act would require testing and approval.
Well, that is troubling, having asbestos in children's programs. Have you found them in adult cosmetics as well? Or
yes, but we're concerned that we make sure that we get it out of kids first.
Yeah.
No, the issue of asbestos has come up in a number of ways in recent times. We should just ban the use of asbestos, period. It's still used in buildings in certain ways, and so we need to get rid of asbestos. Very, very toxic.
And switching gears, just lastly, at an event this week with Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi in Chicago, you said on impeachment, even though he, meaning Trump, has without a doubt committed many impeachable offenses, it would take 20 Republican senators to convict him. So are you saying that you don't support impeachment solely because it won't go anywhere in the Senate?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that I don't support impeachment. In fact, in the last session of Congress, I voted for impeachment. Here's the deal. I want to get rid of this president. And so I want to see what the best path is. Opening articles of impeachment at this point may be premature. Do you know that when Richard Nixon was impeached, there were no articles of impeachment until 2 weeks before he resigned, and months after all the public hearings that were on television, and by the time there were articles of impeachment, everyone saw that this man needed to go, including the Republicans. And so when articles of impeachment appeared, the Republicans said to him, you better resign because otherwise you will be impeached. We're not at that point yet, I don't think, although I just heard Adam Schiff, who's the chair of the Intelligence Committee, say filing articles of impeachment may require then more information be given to Democrats. So it's not off the table, certainly not. But it may take an election to finally get rid of Donald Trump.
And it looked like the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee were praising Adam Schiff this week, which is a turn of what had happened in the past. We also saw a subpoena by a Republican-led committee of President Trump's son. We've seen
In the Senate.
In the Senate, and so
Yes.
we have seen Republicans start to take it to this administration. Does that give you hope that they might?
I'm thinking that maybe that's a little crack in the wall here, that the fact that the Republicans called Donald Trump Jr. to testify, and by the way, he had never been interviewed by Mueller, testified because he was at that meeting in Trump Tower where they met with the Russians. And so I think having Jr. Appear before the Senate committee is a very important sign, possibly of what you're saying, that there is now some Republican support for further investigations and maybe even impeachment.
Well, thank you so much, Representative
Thank
Schakowsky.
you.